A patient came into my trauma bay with no eyes. Bilateral enucleation, both of them gone. He looked directly at me, and he complimented the flowers on my scrub cap. The scrub cap he physically could not see. I've been a nurse for 20 years. I don't believe in ghosts, but I cannot explain John. It was a Tuesday, late fall, one of those nights where the cold gets in through the ambulance bay and just stays. Doesn't matter how high you run the heat, it's just in the building with you now. I was working a double, 12 hours in. I had a cup of vending machine coffee that I think was brewed sometime in 1987. I kept drinking it anyway because that's what you do. The nurse working with me that night, I'll call her Deborah, 12 years in the ER herself. The kind of person who doesn't make unnecessary sounds in a trauma bay. She just works. I noticed at some point that her badge clip was broken. She'd safety pinned it to her scrub cap. That's the kind of thing you clock at hour 10. Your brain starts picking up small stuff because the big stuff is already handled. I'd swapped into my own scrub cat before the shift started, personal one I kept in my locker, floral pattern, I'd had it for years, washed it so many times the colors had kind of given up, faded more near the brim than the top. Once it's on, you forget about it. Radio crackled. Industrial accident, 8 minutes out. You hear that and your body just goes. Doesn't matter how tired you are. Some part of you that's been trained for a decade and a half takes over, and the tired part just has to get out of the way. The doors came open. The paramedics were moving fast. I'm going to be careful here about how I describe what we saw, because I'm not interested in the shock of it. What I'll say is this. There had been an explosion, the kind that doesn't leave things the way they were. The injury that made every person in that bay stop just for half a second before training kicked back in was this. John had lost both eyes. Not damaged, not burned closed. The medical term is bilateral enucleation. Both eyes gone. The attending explained the mechanism right away, the angle, the force, the physics of it. Medically, it made sense. What happened next didn't. We got him stabilized, lines in. I was standing to his left, running my assessment, hands moving, brain tracking, the way it does when you've done something 10,000 times. And then, calm, way too calm for what he'd just been through, he said something. He said, "The flowers on your cap, they're faded, more toward the brim than the top." I stopped. I didn't move, didn't say anything. I just stood there and ran through every explanation I could reach in about 3 seconds. Had he seen me before? Been in the waiting room before transport? Had someone described me to him? I go to coincidence first. I always do. That's just who I am. But he kept going. He said, "Your shears, right hip, orange handles. That's the trauma brand, the ones with the serrated edge on the back." I looked down. Orange handles, serrated edge, right hip, that brand. Every single detail exactly right. I have thought about that moment so many times since, tried to pull it apart and find where the logic holds. Could he have picked up something from sound before he came through the doors, built some kind of picture without seeing, had any history with the facility I didn't know about? I checked. He didn't. Orange trauma shears, yeah, they're not rare. Lots of nurses carry that brand. But the faded flowers on a personal scrub cap I'd had for years? That's not a guess. That's not coincidence. That's information. Accurate, specific information. And there was no physical way for him to get it. We kept working, and here's something I don't know how to fully describe to someone who hasn't been in a trauma bay. When a room full of experienced people all land on the same thought at the same time and nobody says it out loud, there's a quality to the silence that's different from regular silence. It's not uncomfortable, it's not scared, it's more like everyone just got very, very present. Deborah looked at me from across the bay, just once. She looked at my cap, then she looked at me, and I could see it on her face, the same thing that was sitting in my chest. Neither one of us said a word. You don't. You just keep your hands moving and you keep your face neutral and you do your job because that's all you can do. But the glances kept happening. Every 30 seconds, one of us would look up. The room had a weight to it now that it didn't have before. We were charting, we were monitoring, we were doing everything right, and we were also both waiting for something without knowing what. And then John turned his head, not toward me, not toward Deborah, toward the solid wood door on the far side of the room. Nothing was happening at that door, no sound, no shadow, no reason to look at it. He smiled, and then he said, calm as anything, "Dr. Evans is here." 3 seconds later, the handle turned. The attending had not been paged. I've gone back over that moment more times than I can tell you. No footsteps before John spoke, no intercom, no shadow under the door gap, nothing from that hallway that any of us heard. The attending got to the bedside. 20 seconds later, the monitor flatlined. We ran the code the full duration, everything we were trained to do and everything we were obligated to do. We didn't bring him back. In the ICU, we talk about awareness. Patients who were fully under, who come back and describe conversations they couldn't have heard, who talk about watching their own resuscitation from somewhere up near the ceiling. We talk about it in break rooms. You won't find it in any chart. In the psych ward, I learned to tell apart what the mind builds when it's breaking down and what the mind somehow reaches when everything else is stripped away. Those are different. Once you know the difference, you can't unknow it. And in hospice, sitting with people in those last hours, I noticed something I never found the right clinical word for. There's a point right near the end where something shifts, where the rules of what a person can and can't perceive seem to go a little loose. Whether that's the brain doing something extraordinary in its final minutes, or whether that's something else entirely, I honestly don't know. I walked into that shift a skeptic. I walked out a more careful one. Now, they say when you lose one sense, the others get stronger. Hearing, touch, smell, the brain compensates. But John didn't just hear me. He didn't just sense me. He saw me. And I want to know if you've ever had something like that in your life. A blind relative who knew things they shouldn't. A patient who described a room they'd never been in. Someone, anyone, who could see things that the rest of us couldn't account for. Tell me in the comments. I read all of them, and I mean that. I'm Nurse Rains. Take care of yourselves.